Welcome back to the EPS podcast, where everything is a primary source. I am Eric Paul. This is the last episode of the first season. Hopefully there's going to be many seasons of the EPS podcast, and perhaps the guest I have today will tell me a little bit more if that's going to happen or not. But this is the very first last episode of the first season, and I've had a blast so far talking about everything with all sorts of guests, from close friends to lead singers of bands to comedians and professors. And today I am joined by Sarah Moore, who is a psychic. And Sarah and I actually interacted a couple years ago when I had a telephone reading. Sarah, welcome to the EPS podcast. And
thank you so much.
How many telephone readings or just readings in general would you say you do a month?
I do probably around 15 to 20 a week, maybe.
Oh, wow.
Lately they've been longer readings, so probably 13 to 15 a week. Math is hard, so I can't tell you if that means a month. But yeah, it varies. Sometimes I have days where I have a ton of 15-minute readings, and today I had 2 45 minutes and 1/2 hour. So it's always an adventure for me.
And so the reason why I asked you to be the guest on my very last show of the first season is because it was during that reading I had with you a couple of years ago that you encouraged me. You said you had a feeling that I need to do something with radio, that I have a story to tell. I have a voice that needs to be heard, and that you wanted me to go for it. And even though it took about 1.5 years to get around to it, here I am. I went for it, and I've had a blast doing it. And so I figured if there's anybody that would close out this season, it would be you on the show. So thanks again.
Thank you. I'm so honored. Thank you so much. And it's so cool. Like I always tell people, I'm a street sign, but you're still driving the bus. So you might get a huge street sign saying, go do radio. And you're like, I don't want to turn there yet. And you sit in the rest stop for a year, and that's totally fine. When you're ready, you'll do it. And I appreciate that, because otherwise I'm dictating your life and your outcomes. And I do not want that level of responsibility.
Well, I mean, yeah, but I got to give credit where credit's due, because everybody needs that motivation somewhere.
Absolutely.
And I was not expecting it that day at all. And you were telling me
we were talking about your animals.
Yeah, I mean, and that's, when before we hit record on this, you were saying that you get information that you're not always seeking, right? I mean, you get
random songs pop in my head, a word pops in my head, a phrase pops in my head, and I'm like, what's going on? Or I'll be in the shower and some random thought pops in. And I was thinking about one of the Red Sox players from years and years ago, and Gabe Kapler. I'm like, what the heck? I'm not a baseball fan. Like, I'm in it for the snacks and maybe being in Boston, but I really don't care about the games. And then I was looking at the news the next night, and there's a thing on Gabe Kapler and his fitness regime. I was like, oh, okay. So the synchronicity happens all the time for me.
I love that. And it's something I've always paid a lot of attention to. I can't get over it. Even if it's something as simple as I'm like writing or typing a word and then somebody says it.
Yeah.
I always feel like that has to be just paid attention to, even for just a minute.
Yeah.
And
I think it's our street signs. I think it's I think it's like you've made it to here. It's like, if you rock climb and you lead climb, you've hit your next piece of equipment that you can make yourself safely anchored to move forward again.
That's a great way of putting it.
That is kind of neat. I don't think I get credit for that.
That's such a great way. So we're going to make a whole list of quotes from you that we can put on bumper stickers. Stickers are those framed, inspirational photographs and stuff. So originally we were going to talk, and I think we can still do this because I think it's all one and the same. We were going to talk about animal activism, or animal rescues, and sort of the place that pets and other domestic animals have arrived in our lives and have become that much more important. And one thing that distinguishes the service that you provide is that not only do you do readings for humans, but you also do readings for pets. When did you arrive at that decision that you weren't just going to, because I think most psychics probably just do people, right?
Well, no, I actually started with animals, and I didn't think I was psychic. So my mother died a gosh, it'll be 21 years this coming Sunday. And she was hit by a car in a crosswalk, and the woman didn't see her because of the glare of the sun. So it was a total accident. And a month prior to that, I had been on my honeymoon and I was reading a Sylvia Browne book called The Other Side and Back, all about life, death, why are we here, sole purpose. And I was on my honeymoon in Mexico drinking a margarita, and I'm like, why am I reading about death? Well, mom dies. I open up my journal, and the only thing written on the page is we never really die. And I write as much as I talk. Like I don't just, if I'm going to use a journal, I'm going to fill the page. I don't just waste a line or two at the top. But I did. And I went to a therapist and tried to heal myself, knowing if I ever had a kid, I'd mess it up if I didn't process my grief. And I made the therapist cry. So I was like, 2 more sessions later, I was like, I don't think this is working. And I got into Reiki and energy work. And I finally, after a few sessions, I felt such a relief and a healing. And then I became attuned to do Reiki. And then my son was born. I was pregnant with one of my attunements. I think my second level, he was in utero. And he's 16 now. And I got divorced when he was 1, and a friend was in dog show world. She's like, Sarah, you need an income. There's money in dogs. And I'm like, I'm not going to Best in Show. Thank you very much. But I did. So I set up a demo day at a dog training center, and I was, my rates were reasonable. I wasn't just bilking people for money, but I thought, oh, I can do energy work. Yeah. And I was doing this demo day to see if I could actually pull it off. Like you, I just sort of jumped like, yeah, let's see if this works. And I had a demo day. I had 9 15-minute readings, and I started hearing the dogs talk. Like I heard it. I saw images in my head, and everything I said was validated by the owner. Excuse me. It's pollinating here. And that's when I was like, okay, there's something else going on here. And that's when I became aware of the psychic ability that was happening. So it wasn't a choice. It sort of chose me.
Okay. And so you would say that, I mean, because the first question whenever I analyze anything, or in this case, anybody's career, is you know, what materials are made from. I mean, so when you're communicating or listening to an animal, you mentioned it's a lot of images. They don't. Yes. And I remember talking to a scientist about that some time ago. I was like, you know, do animals? Because when I think, I can hear my voice in my head. You know, yes. I can hear my own inner monologue, but obviously animals don't have voices. And he said, no, they see more in pictures. Like that's
exactly how I get a reading.
Tend to be in pictures, not so much that. So I guess the world of an animal, particularly pets, how has that existed in the last, I don't know, 100 years, 50 years? Has it been, I mean, because you said you were at a dog show. I mean, those dogs
I'm there to see which is the prettiest brown bitch.
Right.
And
I mean,
can you read my stud? And you know, honest to God, I'd sit there giggling like this. I have an environmental degree. This was not my comfort zone. I am not a dog trainer. I'm not a behaviorist. I'm like, what is going on? So I think the animals were a necessary part of lives, for the milk, for the food, for the carrying of you know, when in the covered wagons, getting us there. They were a piece of equipment a lot of times, but they were not only equipment, they were also food. And, you know, if your car breaks down, the first thing you want to do is like swear at your car and kick a tire. So when a horse doesn't pull, there can be a response to it. And I think that they weren't always given the respect that they deserved. And now, just kind of bridge a huge gap, and we can talk about the in-betweens. I think that animals now come into our lives, especially our pets, to teach us a lesson. You know, I know that my 2 sole purposes here are to understand family and self-worth. Not easy lessons. And I could talk all day about that. I was firstborn child. I was a girl. My brother was born 2 years later, and they nicknamed him son number 1. Like I've been in number 2 spot, even though I was supposed to be number 1. Yeah. And that theme had continued. So I decided, fine, after my divorce, like I'm good. I don't ever need to get married. I can be a party one. That is not helping me understand the family lesson. So it's kind of like the universe, God, higher power, whatever, was like, hold my beer. Let's get Sarah this lesson. And so I adopted a kitten on a Wednesday. My son was in 2nd grade, so he was 6 years old, maybe. I adopted a kitten on a Wednesday. And then on a Friday, I was doing a reading and I hear the shrieking noise outside, and I had a beagle on my doorstep. literally a 5-week-old beagle on a freedom run from miles down the road. And here I am with instant family. You know, I have a puppy, a kitten, and a 6-year-old, and I was able to run away on the weeks I didn't have my son, but that wasn't making me get this. So my animals forced my hand at this lesson. I still have the cat. The beagle got rehomed like 9 months later. I did name her Karma, and the saying is true. So it didn't go well. But I now have a chocolate lab who's sleeping beside me. You'll probably hear a snore or bark in a bit.
Yeah,
but, you know, this is now about the family that I've created and her being peaceful in that space.
You know, and it's so important. I mean, you're spot on with that, because I mean, in our lifetimes, you know, just in, you know, since we're, you know, in, you know, 20th century, you know, products of the 20th century, animals are not, you know, especially dogs and cats and even more exotic animals than that are not odd fixtures of homes and in people's lives. I mean, we have everything from dog parks to grooming and cosmetics and swimming pools and everything for the dogs. Yeah, I mean, it's almost like design. And then, you know, but when you get to it, to the bottom of it, to the basis of it, it's like, I didn't have a pet growing up. Like, it wasn't a normal thing. You know, we had gerbils when I was a kid. But it wasn't until just a couple, you know, about 20 years ago that I met my now wife, and she's an animal lover beyond any description. That is her calling. And ever since we've had a house, it's just been one animal added to our family after another. We rescue a lot of animals and adopt and things like that and foster. And you know, to me, it wasn't my compulsion, but now that it's part of my life, I'm like, oh, I get it. Like, they do give you a sense of purpose. Like, they look at you. And, you know, I was just at the ER for one of our dogs for 3 hours the other night.
Oh gosh.
Because they always do something stupid.
Yes. Mine ate irises the other day. Turns out they're not good for dogs.
Ooh.
Thanks, dog.
Yeah, and they got to find it out. And ours ate a discarded corn cob. So
those are the worst.
We did the nice thing, because you know, we finish our corn, and instead of throwing it in the trash, we chuck it into the woods, because that allows for birds and chipmunks and stuff to have a meal. You know, harmony with nature and everything. And then our dog goes over and starts gnawing on it. And
that's so many dogs choke on that and have to have obstructions removed.
Yeah, so she's okay now. But it was, but while I was there, I was thinking about this podcast. I'm like, I mean, this is such a different world for those animals, and there's still terrible things that happen to animals today. There's still cruelty, there's still abuse, and all these things, to the point that there are so many rescues. You know, we're here in New Hampshire, and we're
very lucky.
Ever since I was talking to somebody in that field in animal rescue, and they're like, yeah, pretty much right around Hurricane Katrina is when this whole region got slammed. Because all the animals were displaced, and the people were too, and they were trucking them up to the no-kill states here in the north to find adoptions. And then on top of that, and then the other day when I called the ER for our dog, same thing happened. They said they had a recording saying, you know, just in the last couple of years, there's been so many people with pets that the entire industry is now strained.
I've learned a lot of the behind the scenes of what they're going through, and they truly do it for the love of the animal. I mean, people aren't going into the veterinary field for the money. You do that, be an anesthesiologist. You're not with the animals. And the vet techs do all of the stuff that an anesthesiologist would do. So it's fascinating. But I will say, going back to Katrina, I started doing this when the Katrina dogs had come up. And I was not prepared for what I saw. I thought, like a vet, like, oh, puppies and kittens. No, some of these animals were horrifically abused or neglected. There's different parts of our country, and certainly different parts in the world, and how we view or relate to our animals. And, you know, in the South, or I read a woman who lives in Jamaica now, and she goes, yeah, dogs do not come in your house. She goes, they live outside, you throw the food out there, and they're part of your family, and they play with the family, but they are not indoor dogs. And if you had one in the house, you'd be looked at like you had 3 heads. And so Yeah. And, when I said that you and I are lucky to be living in the Northeast where animals have more of a voice, going down to the South, there's definitely areas that it's absolutely fine to kick a dog. It's absolutely fine to shoot your dog. And
oh my goodness.
I had to really, I had to come to terms when I teach this, let me do that a different way. When I teach people how to do what I do, I warn them, like, you're going to see the good, the bad, the ugly. Yeah. So I, as a psychic, just sort of observe it and can't let my emotions intertwine with what I would be feeling, because then I can't deliver the message. I'd be crying along with people, and I'm just the messenger.
Right.
I'm the conduit, just the messenger, just a conduit. I mean, it's pretty stinking cool that I'm able to do it, but I have to be an observer as I'm showing you what they're saying.
So both of what you do and what the animal rescue societies for years have done serves a very similar purpose, and that is to give animals that can't speak for themselves, have, and oftentimes have trouble defending themselves. Even the most ferocious dog can't really do much after, if they're going up against firearms or a whole bunch of people. They are at our mercy. And so the original seal of the ASPCA shows a man hitting a horse with an angel holding a sword, stopping him. And like you were saying before, I mean, back in 1869, when that was founded, that was the primary animal that protective people wanted to see the cruelty to. And then everything else seems to kind of fall in line from there. So I feel like they serve that purpose of, because here in New England, you find there's old 18th and 19th century animal pounds, around the area. There's usually these circular rock structures. And that was the town pound. Because, if one of their cows went stray, or somebody lost their goat, if you found a horse or something like that, you just walk them into the pound and put a notice somewhere, lost dog or whatever, jump right out. But the livestock and stuff, because it was valuable to them, so
did you see that was on, I think it was on New Hampshire Chronicle, one of the local shows, and a man was rebuilding the rock walls that did that. I don't know. That you just triggered that. I completely forgot about that. It was,
you see them all over. I mean, we have one here in Milton that I think has been rebuilt, or they want to rebuild.
I think that was what I saw.
It might have been there, because I know that was a project that they had been talking about for a while.
Yes.
And
fascinating.
It is a good, if nothing else, it just is a reminder of, yes, humans and people in this country have had a long relationship with animals. Yeah. But treating them, like you said, as members of the family in your household, and, extending to them the same kinds of respect and dignity that humans have, that seems to be kind of a new thing. And so I can't get out of my mind the 1869 part. Yeah. Because New York is where the ASPCA was founded. And then there was a women's ASPCA or not ASPCA, but the Pennsylvania Society for the, against cruelty to animals, that was founded shortly around that same time in Philadelphia. And, I think a lot of people tend to just kind of look at history books and they say, Civil War and Reconstruction as just one era, and they're like, yep, and it ended 1877. It was over. I'm like, no. And it wasn't just Reconstruction of the physical war-torn South. It was a reconstruction of everything. It was a reconstruction of the physical damage. It was a reconstruction of the Constitution. I mean, there's 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments were all, one right after the other. It was a reconstruction of the borders and boundaries of the country. There was Western growth. There was reconstruction that way. And then there's reconstruction of the culture and the society. And that, I think, is why, I mean, because in that era, especially in the North, there's the new woman. The college educated, usually upper middle class, and they start getting involved in a lot of crusades and activism, kind of holdovers from before the war, and men as well. But those reformers with their attention on animals, I don't think it's a coincidence. I don't think it's random that it started to take shape when it did.
I agree.
That they, so it's very telling of that era in at least the United States. And they were riffing off of what the British had already, they had the Royal Society Against the Cruelty of Animals, that they were, inspired by. Yeah. But applying it here, and it wasn't just the United States that was going through Reconstruction at that time either. It was Japan was undergoing a great transformation from feudal Japan into the modern style. And in fact, that's, if I'm not mistaken, isn't it's pronounced Reiki?
Yep.
Reiki was
that's from Japan.
That arrived around the same time, right?
Yeah, Madame Takata, and there was another guy that started it, and it used to be a very elitist thing. You used to have to pay, I think it was like $100,000 or something like that to even learn it, and then it became less secretive, and now it's becoming much more mainstream. And with the animals, I do think that they came from, or they were looked at as property. You get married, you get a goat, you get the dowry, but then they became family and companions. And I do think the animals had a purpose, like the Dalmatians protecting the horses on the carriages, or the fire trucks. Like, that was to keep everybody safe. And the dogs that have the big ripples on their face, the blood flows out of the ripples, so they would defend you from the bear attack or the wild boars. So their physical bodies had a purpose as well. And now we're like breeding these teacup miniature dogs so that we can put them in our pocket and be cute. And I think that is one area that I would want to be careful of, because we are messing with nature. And, I mean, look at lip fillers and look at what people are doing to their bodies now. Anyway, we're doing it to ourselves, but we're kind of not really asking permission of the animals and doing it to them.
Yeah. I even hesitate sometimes when I see people like dyeing their animals' hair and fur and stuff like that.
And designer dogs. People are coming up with new breeds just for greed and money.
Yeah.
And, look at German Shepherds. They've been bred into a body that they can barely maintain. I kind of want to step back and be like, guys, what are we doing? Because it's great, but sometimes, and I'm kind of all over the place, so you can redirect me. No, but sometimes some of the really broken people get into rescue. Like attracts like. If you're a person who's been neglected or abused, working with an abused or neglected animal is not only comfortable, it's familiar. Yeah. And then I think sometimes we don't. I think that we put what we think the animal wants out there, and we get stuck on that, and we're it's too linear, and we're not willing to bend and sway. And I think that if we listened to the animals more, or understood why they're exactly with us, or why they picked us, or why this animal had that kind of life, we might be able to say, oh, you know what, this dog I know can be rehabilitated, but maybe it just wants to go live on a farm, and I'm you're pushing rope uphill. You're never going to be successful, because it's your ego saying what you want this dog to do. I don't know if that makes sense.
It does, because I think that and again, that's something where you have much more of a feeling for it than I think a lot of people would even attempt to get at, and that is to be able to actually know what an animal's thinking and feeling about something. That it's one thing to put them in a funny t-shirt or something like that, but
I used to think that was so abusive. I used to think, oh my God, that poor dog is dressed up and wearing a hat. Yeah. And then I started reading animals, and one of them was like, I need my pearl bracelets. And I told the woman, she goes, oh yeah, the dog loves to dress up. I have these stretchy pearl bracelets I put on when we go out. I'm like, seriously? And then I've had dogs say, oh, I want this collar. It's $19.99 on the end cap at PetSmart. And I'm like, well, okay. And I say it, and people are like, how did the dog know the dollar? I'm like, I don't know. I do not know if the dog knew it or if the universe said it. I cannot explain the crazy things that I say that are validated. It's ridiculous.
I mean, and I guess we can add another thing to that same time period. Psychic readings, spiritualism. Yeah. That also it
Mhm.
it also became part of the mainstream. It became more, you had more people putting stock into it in that
Yes.
same era. So
Well,
I mean,
if you've ever read The Mists of Avalon,
mm-mm.
it's a made up story. However, it talks about the Knights of the Round Table and Sir Lancelot, and when the
Oh yeah,
priestesses and the priests were equal. And the priestesses and the goddess energy, they used to consult with the kings. And the kings looked at it. Ronald Reagan's wife, Nancy Reagan, would talk to her spiritual advisor to get insight before making big decisions. And years ago, I went to the library, and of course, I see the book about Ghostbusters, and it was written by Dan Aykroyd's father, because Dan Aykroyd's great grandfather used to do seances. So in the movie Ghostbusters, the slime was the magma or smegma or whatever it was that they created. And if like in Ghostbusters, when New York was angry, the pink slime got angry. But when everybody sang in Kumbaya at the end, everybody was giggling, rolling around in the goo.
Yeah.
We do that as well around us. And I don't know how the heck I just went off on that tangent for you, but the seances. So yes, it's another tool, and I think it's coming more full circle. And a whole other episode would be, why are we looking for that? What has happened to God, and how has that been diluted so that we no longer have that higher power? We're all looking to belong in some capacity, and we've sort of lost our bearings, I think. Well, animals are here to get us back,
right? And that's where it's like the perfect combination of the two things that we need, because I feel like a lot of the seances and that spiritualism of the late 19th, early 20th century was dressed up a lot, very dramatic. They, candles lit and dark room, and long
that sounds like so much work.
And it's like, but when somebody ggets a reading from you, it's nothing like that. It's
it's a phone reading. I'm probably still in my pajamas. It was
right
before 11, because I don't have to dress up. I got rid of my office during the pandemic. I love sage, but I don't and kumbaya. And that's I will say, the worthiness thing. Sometimes I feel like the odd psychic out. Long Island medium is got the nails and the hair, and I'm out there stacking firewood or planting my garden before my call or between calls. So I don't go to Reiki circles and Reiki shares. I feel like I'm the guy wearing the hot dog costume going, there's something good here, you should try it. And so I'm the billboard for the other side and what we're capable of and how we can use intuition to help guide us. And then the animal piece, it's so interesting because people will call me for an animal reading, and 99% of the time, the animal is mirroring us or teaching us something about us. So Sid, my 6.5-year-old chocolate lab, she's a slug. She doesn't like to move. She's been laying here next to me. She forgot it's dinner time, I think. And about a month ago, she was getting up at 4:30 every morning. 4:30, and I'm like, oh my God. And I'd take her out, and then it transitioned to, not only did I have to get her up, feed her, and take her out because she did go to the bathroom, then she'd run downstairs and bark until I came down. And I was like, this dog is going to kill me. She's going to be the death of me. I have a 16-year-old. Like, I need sleep. So I called an animal communicator, and because I can't read myself, it's like being a great therapist, but you have really bad kids. I just couldn't do it myself. She's too close, and I have to be human. And the therapist, the communicator said that I have my hands in so many other people's pots that I'm not taking time for me. So the dog was preemptively trying to get me up so that I had quiet before my day began. And I was like, that's very sweet, honey. Knock it off. And
thanks a lot for
now she's sleeping till 7 or 8. I'm like, thank you. But I needed to be reminded, Sarah, when you're outside and she stops walking, just take it in and look around and be grateful. So I got the reminder of, thank you for teaching me this. I'm like, wah, wah, wah. But I also am more grateful now that I'm getting this lesson, because her behavior and her sleeping and being quiet and calm is validation to me that I listened and that I moved the needle.
Yeah, that's an important thing to recognize, because and I guess you more sensitive than others, but I mean, I remember seeing like an Unsolved Mysteries episode where a cat alerted the people of like a gas leak in the house. But even if it's not like life and death type stuff, animals do have, I think they're so much smarter than we give them credit for. And
well, they don't have ego usually. Cats might, some horses do, most dogs don't. Like a dog in a reading will tell you, oh, oh, I'm eating that. You don't want me to do that? Do this and take away my favorite treat. And then the dog's like, damn it, I told you. And a cat's like, I'm not going to tell you that, but I'm going to pee outside the litter box until you figure it out. And a horse is like, I'm just not going to move or I'm going to buck you. So there's sort of like the pecking order of animals in their intelligence or self-awareness. So yeah, it's very interesting.
But they mislead you sometimes in the fact that, it's like because we assign intelligence to ability to speak. Yes. And if you can't speak, then you're not all that smart.
Ask anybody who has ALS who can't speak, but their brain is fully functioning if they're still intelligent. You will get a very honest answer.
Oh, yes.
Like, stop talking down to me. I hear you. Like a friend in a wheelchair, the woman who taught me all my aquatics. My prior life, I was an aquatics person, and she was in a wheelchair, and I'd go out to eat with her, and people would look at me and say, what will she have? And I'd look at her and say, I don't know, what do you want? And then I'd look back at the waitress and be like, she wants this. And the waitress would just flush and turn red. But I'm like, oh God, you really are disrespected. We don't give these animals the credit. Well,
no,
I don't think we give them the credit they deserve for the role they play in our lives. I don't think we necessarily take advantage of them. Because, making the decision to help an animal transition is probably one of the hardest decisions we have to make.
Yeah.
And I'm grateful to be able to help people through that. Animals also don't fear death the way that we do. They look at it like, oh, good, I'm going home. Okay. And I've told people, hundreds of thousands of readings that your dog might sit at the door the day you're taking it to the vet. And then you call me crying saying, they don't know where they're going. Their tail's wagging and they look excited. And I'm like, they don't damn well where they're going. They know they're going to heaven or the other side. They don't fear it. They're like, I'll see you when you get here. So when you call me for a reading and say, does my dog miss me? They're like, why would I miss you? I'm talking to you. Like, they don't even understand the question. And then I kind of giggle, and I hope I never get jaded enough to sort of like Sylvia Brown was at the end of her life. She was a psychic who used to be on Montel Williams. And people would say, is my family okay? And she's like, oh my God, they're all fine. She was a wicked smoker. And she'd get grumpy that she got asked the same question. I know that I do this for a living, and I get these questions on repeat, but it's new to you. And if you've never had a reading, I'm not going to insult you. It's like me going to get my tires changed. Please don't yell at me. I don't know anything about it.
Yeah. No, it's so funny. I mean, it's like, you were talking about all these other people in times that have used psychics as well. And I thought about Evangeline Adams, who also had a house here in New Hampshire. And she was a psychic that the newspapers would ask her for readings. Not only was she a psychic for different celebrities, with the personal psychic, but she did readings for the stock market.
No way.
Yeah, so she would report, her visions for what she thought. And this was in the 1920s when, everybody was interested in the stock market, and she gave predictions about that. And so, I mean, it's
I can't do that. I can talk to animals and dead people, find dead bodies, but I can't read numbers. And well, I know angel numbers or things like that, but a friend of mine left his job and he's like, all right, Sarah, I got a deal. I'm like, what? He goes, I'm going to bet on horses. You're going to help me and I'll split the money. I was like, okay. I got every single one wrong. I'm so sorry. And for me, it's like picking lottery numbers. There's no emotion associated with it and there's no relevance. So it doesn't get me squishy. I wish I could do it. And everyone's like, how come you don't win the lottery? I'm like, how come I can't read my dog? I get to be human, which is not always a good thing. Being psychic, I can say profound things. I've spoken other languages in readings and been like, I just said, what in Jamaican? And it's so cool. And then I have a dog that I'm like, why did you just say poop? Like, what is wrong with you? But I'm having my experience off the clock. And I think that's what makes me the odd girl out with some psychics. Some people really live this, wearing the funky makeup and, having the sage or the patchouli. And I don't understand why we need to make it weirder than it is. And I don't need smoke and mirrors. If I don't get an answer, I actually hear crickets in my head, and I have no problem telling you that. My ego is not driving this field for me.
Do you feel that some of that is to communicate with the intended audience of those psychics is that they might dress a certain way or present themselves a little bit more garishly?
Yeah, I think they do that. Well, is it just who they are and that's their soul group and it feels comfortable for them as the psychic with all the flowy things and the jingle jangles, or is it part of their uniform? I chuckle because when somebody doesn't know who I am and I walk into a party, like I have a bachelorette party for 15 women in Conway on Saturday, I don't know what I'm walking into. And I always giggle because I'm like, God, what are they expecting? And when my friend was dating this guy who was spooked by me, I took my scarf, I wrapped it around my head, I put my grandmother's brooch on my forehead, and my son he was able to pick any, this is going to give you some insight in my life. When we didn't have any money, a big deal was to go to the dollar store and he could pick one thing. Well, he picked a dead crow, a fake crow. And so I put the fake crow in the kitchen in the window and showed up opening the door with my Swami hat like and sage, and they just kind of stood there. I was like, I'm totally kidding.
Yeah.
Come on. and took it all off. So I'll do it to joke with people, but yeah, I think that sometimes people feel like when they're in uniform, you have a little more confidence to, like, you can hide behind that. So I can read tarot cards and angel cards and all different cards. I have a little slight obsession with them because I think they're beautiful, but I don't do it traditionally. So if I were to pull cards for you, if I was not confident or comfortable as a psychic, I could flip a card and be like, oh, this card says this. I still read a card using psychic insight, but I also have a visual for you to look at versus me. So I would say their uniform might also be something that they can say, oh, I'm in psychic mode, I'm allowed to say that.
I see what you mean. So because I go down to Salem sometimes, Massachusetts, and they have readings and stuff. And I think some of the people that they're trying to attract, there's lots of tourists there, would not pay them the money if they were dressed in just, regular clothes, and if you saw jeans me,
absolutely. If you saw me sitting next to the Long Island medium, which I don't know if you know who she is,
I do,
Caputo, you would go to her. And if you looked at what we charge for rates, you would go to the more expensive one because you're like, she must be better. I look at this as I don't need more money than I can spend. Like, yeah, my kid's probably going to go to college. I could bump my rates up, but this feels like an equal exchange. I think this is more than fair, and I need to be able to live, and I can't do it 40 hours a week. So I'm in line with what works for me. Yeah. But I do think ego also plays a major factor in how we present ourselves.
And to link it to the pet side of it, I feel like the intended audience of all the different rescue leagues and animal rights groups and those who are just there to, from veterinarians all the way down, the majority of people that take part in those, I feel like are middle class, working class, like pretty middle, because it's like you said earlier, for the last 100 years or so, and again, we go back to the same time period. It's telling of the time period where there was a growing middle class. There, by the end of the 19th century, there was one, and they had more leisure time. They had more time at home. They could entertain the idea of having cats and dogs in their house, and not just functionality, not just to be a mouse chaser, but just as company. And so it's like the same audience. Would you say that most of your clients, people that want to talk to you, are also of that same part of society?
I think so. I definitely get all kinds. When I was going to dog shows, if you're showing dogs, there is money that you need to have to do that sport. You're buying a dog for minimum $3,000. You're investing in it. You're paying for training. You're paying for the best food and the grooming and all that. So there's definitely socioeconomic levels. To spend money on me, a lot of times it's people's last resort. The vets haven't been able to diagnose or figure it out, or this is the Hail Mary pass before you put the dog down. So sometimes, people will save their money to be able to get the reading and have the funds for it. And it really is a giant mix. And, you see the big muscle men who will get down and play with a kitten. Sometimes the animals can be an equalizer too, because the people that have the money, we all understand the pain and grief you go through when you lose an animal. Yeah. So we're all kind of knocked down at the knees, and we're all sitting in the same way when we're grieving the loss of a pet. So a homeless person losing their dog, maybe not homeless because they'll be judged more, but somebody on the lower socioeconomic level is going to have the same exact grief that somebody who has more money than God. Yeah. And I think that if we looked at it that way, it's fascinating to me that we can be empathetic towards each other when it comes to our animals, and look at our politics and our religion right now in our country. We are absolutely, as a collective, unwilling to budge. And so I think that if we could really look at the story of the animals in a more global way and say, what are they here to teach us? And what as a collective, as a community, what are we missing? And what are we willing to do for our animals that we're not willing to do for us? I mean, how many people haven't had a physical or a mammogram, but you've taken your dog in every 6 months to get their Prozac dosage? So we're willing to treat our animals with love and respect. And I would love to see that reflected back at us. And then there's people that sometimes their animal is the only thing keeping them here.
Yeah.
And I'd be curious from your perspective with the women's rights and all of that, do you think that when women had more of a voice, or not even the women, the marginalized populations, when they began having more of a voice, do you think that they could understand or relate more to what the animal was feeling, and therefore the animals kind of got swept up into the cause? Do you think it's related? And I'm asking that sincerely, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I think that and so one of the questions I have here is, status in society. And as women had in the 19th century was particularly, I think since the day one of the country, there's been opportunities and things that have allowed for women's role in society to become elevated. And in the 19th century, there was plenty of them where they, and a specific part of women, particularly the upper middle class, college educated, and with leisure time on their hands, were more likely to take up different causes that were meaningful to them and and not only just them themselves, but other women as being the heads of households. And part of keeping a house in order is, and at some point or another, the animals come factored into it. So I think that, there is probably a close relationship with that, that it's not unusual to think that they go hand in hand together.
I'd never really considered it. When you asked to do this, it's interesting.
Of course, we have the cliche. Well, I mean, I go back to the actual starting of the societies, and it was, as far as I understand it, right, the ASPCA came out first, and it was a man who started that. And just like a lot of other organizations, women were marginalized there. They were pushed, to the side. And so that's why they would make their own women's versions of those same things. Just like all of the, veterans groups always had auxiliaries, women's auxiliaries. And as time has gone on, when the role of women, say in the military, has changed quite a bit and has become closer to what men do in the military. The VFW, the American Legion, I don't think for all I know they do, but I don't think they usually have as many auxiliary services as they used to. Because it's like they've proven themselves as being equal to men. So because we always have that image of ourselves like mid 20th century of like a kid begging for a dog, and it's usually the dad with his pipe sticking out, be like, well, if you get it, you're gonna I'll teach you how to raise that dog right. And the mom's like, well, you're gonna be the one that walks it, I'm not gonna help,
right?
That kind of thing, mom. But but of course that's a lot of media. That's not necessarily, I mean, that's what we have. And I think that we can probably find plenty of evidence to support any of those things that to be true or false. But you have to think that the animal being invited out of the barnyard and into the home.
I wonder what it thought of that. Like if it was like, oh geez, put me back in the barn, you guys are messing up.
There's or if it was like, all right,
fine, I'll come in. Like put me back with the chickens. They don't talk all night and they're not arguing.
That was, I mean, sorry, that was a lot of women, for better or for worse, that was their role well into the 20th century, was to be the manager of the household, and that included the animals. And once they came into the household, having that bond.
Yeah. And one of the things when you said the creation of the SPCA or whatever the organization was. I think that one of the things that humanity really gets tripped up on is greed. And, that could be an evangelical church that's making millions and not paying taxes, and we need them or else we'll never be okay. I think that we can say the same with animals. Watching the commercials that show up, on a Lifetime television show, they know their target audience, they know who's going to open the purse strings, and in there begging, saying, these animals are dying, send your money. Some of the ones that play on the empathy factor to get us to donate are some of the ones that don't let the money trickle down to the animals as much as our local ones. There's an animal rescue league in Portland, Animal Refuge League of Greater Portland. It's in Westbrook, and I will support them till the day I die. I've done galleries, events for them. My friend Kathleen Stone is a phenomenal psychic, and we'll go on stage and do an event, and they take all the money. They built a $5 million facility on donations, and some of the big donors put the money out, and then people like us making $4,000 in a pop for them. And the animals have classical music playing. They have the essential oil scents that flow through, and they are in it for the right reasons. And they also know that there's some animals that might not be able to be rehomed safely. And then they work to figure out what's the best approach. I'm assuming they're no kill, but I don't know. But there are some animals that they're too sick, or, what do we do? And I live in Conway, and we have a rescue that's like, we need money for this one dog's surgery. And I want to be like, has anyone asked the dog if they feel like they've completed their life? Because maybe the dog is like, no, that person that broke my femur needed to realize there's another way to move forward, and they're being judged because the entire world knows they did this. I'm good. Let me go home. But I think ego or greed sometimes, it's like God is available to all of us, higher power, put whatever you want when I say God. But then all of a sudden it's like, oh, we can use this for power and control and manipulation, and people need us to get to that. And I think with animals, sometimes it's like, if you don't give, another dog's life will be lost. And it's like, why are we doing the heartstring? Why aren't we saying, hey, we're able to do this, this, and this, and these are the services we're providing. Let's celebrate it with the positive versus working on the negative aspects.
Yeah. I know what you mean. I mean, it's like, well, any advertising, they're always trying to, are we going to have a spokesperson? Are we going to have, try to, and it works. I mean, there's people that,
it works. That's why they do it.
The Sarah McLachlan song starts, and they, it's heart-wrenching.
I told a friend when I die, she has to sing that at my funeral and wail and throw herself on the coffin. She's like, you're the most morbid person. I'm like, no, do it. She's like, all right. Like, I got to go first then.
It's I get I mean, and like I said earlier, I didn't grow up with animals in my household. I didn't really understand and appreciate it, but it's something I've learned to, and I've completely full on understand that it says so much about an individual, a family, a society, a community, about how they treat animals, and how much they, and in particular the ones who are not bred, to be shopped and stuff, like the ones who are just kind of lost, or they're mutts, or they're forgotten about.
Well, if somebody's disrespectful or cruel to an animal, one, how they feel about themselves, and two, how you're going to be treated as well. So pay attention. You're hurting animals, hurt people. So we're being given these big signs, billboards, of like, hey, this is who I am. And then we're like, oh, but they'll change. Okay, they probably won't. I think that I like that animals are becoming more part of the family. I will also say it's very interesting to me that everybody thinks they have the best dog, and that everybody thinks you want to see their dog at Walmart or in a shopping cart or in a restaurant. And I love animals. I also love leaving my animal at home sometimes when I go to dinner. And it's interesting that people have forgot to say, are you comfortable with this? Like, you go to someone's house and they bring their 3 dogs. They might not have even asked if it's okay. It's an assumption that this is part of my family. Yeah. It's like, right. It's part of your family, but it's destroying my home.
it seems to almost fall right behind the I guess you can call it the cult of childhood, where from the pretty much the mid 20th century onwards, and it gained a lot of traction as time has gone on, where kids are the focal point of everybody's life. That's all you think about. If you have kids, or if you know kids, like they are the most important. They are, of course, they're super, but animals, and it's almost like, well, yeah, of course, when you go to a home improvement store, you're going to see 7 dogs wandering. It's like, no, like there's no reason for them to be here.
Lead in like 3 aisles away from their owner, sniffing something that they shouldn't be sniffing. I'm like, oh God.
Well, it's funny. I remember about 20 years ago, maybe like 15 years ago, I was walking to a Target and somebody had a dog with them, and he was like holding the dog, and the security guard just, there's a guard up front. He's like, you can't have that in here. And the guy's like, oh, really? And he's like, okay, I'll go to. And then I swear, I bet you 3 years later, everybody was bringing their dogs, and because like one person tried it and nobody. Yep. But I'm like, they don't really have a place in these stores. It's probably really annoying for them.
Yeah, it's hard because I love the animals, but I'm also like, are you insecure enough that you can't be there without your dog? Are you hiding behind your animal? And chaotic people get chaotic dogs, and then they create, like, think about Pigpen from Charlie Brown.
Yeah.
Some of the more chaotic, less effective humans that are the hot messes will have an animal that's a hot mess, and it's because you're like, oh my God, your dog just knocked over this, and they're the ones running around and go to this, go to that, and all of a sudden they're not a target. So they have a dog that's a disaster, and now they think they're off the radar. And that's a very subconscious thing. I don't think anybody consciously is like, hey, I'm a hot mess, I'm going to go to screwed up dog. But there's Dr. Phil, how's that working for you? It's like, perfect. Nobody's looking at me. Yeah. And I'm thinking, I am. Like, you're a hot mess. I see through that, which really is frustrating. And that sometimes takes the fun out of like ignorance is bliss, because I see the truth behind it just as a psychic. So when somebody's lying to me, I'm like, God, what do you think? It's stupid. Yeah. So if you tell me, no, I just fed my dog, and I'm like, no, you didn't. Like, why are you lying? I'm surprised by humanity.
It's almost like this whole trend with animals has gone on a big curve, where it's like, on the one hand, 150 years ago, we're like, would you please stop hitting the animals? And now we're going all the way to the end of like, okay, I'm glad that they're not being hurt physically, but that a parade is not the best place for a dog. Like,
so I have to tell you, I used to do readings at the Colony Hotel in Kennebunkport, and it's a very fancy, very amazing, very haunted old hotel, kind of like The Shining, and it's right on the water in Kennebunk. And I went to a dog wedding. They were married in holy matrimony, and it was a joke. The dogs didn't really get married, but they had this ceremony, and the officiant said funny things like holy matrimony. But then they had a reception, and all the people from all over the world or all over the country who come to this thing, it's not cheap, and it's their reunion. It happened for years. They had a blast. I sat at a reception for a dog wedding that was better than my wedding years prior. And I was like, what is happening? And at that event, I was downstairs at the bar having dinner like another night, and these people came and sat at the bar and had their dog on a chair and ordered a meal for the dog and let it eat off the table. And I'm thinking, this seems normal in their wheelhouse. I grew up with a chocolate lab that my dad said, she'll be outside every night. She wasn't. My mom would go to bed first. The dog would trot upstairs after her, land on the bed. She'd hear my dad coming up the stairs, hop off the bed, and get on her bed and act like she wasn't up there. And it was an unspoken thing. As long as dad doesn't see it, we're fine. Mm-hmm. So, I've seen sort of the whole spectrum. It's fascinating.
It is.
It also shows me a lot about the people.
I mean, all the way through this, I mean, it's such a reflection. I mean, I guess the way the animals exist in our lives is long been a reflection of not just this country's history. The way that the animals provide balance in our life, that's what I think from the beginning of our country on, we've been looking for a balance.
Yes.
not to have things one way or the other. I mean, we talk about in, the Constitution was created so there's checks and balances, so things are balanced out.
And we are out of balance right now.
Right.
Very
And that's what I mean. It's
think.
like, so, and it's reflected in that kind of, when you have extremes where on one part of, the socioeconomic ladder, or one part of the, geographical, you can have animals treated like dirt, and then on the other side they're treated like royalty and they're having weddings. It's like, can we just strike a balance? And it seemed like back with in the late 19th century with those organizations, they were also they weren't asking for anything ridiculous. They started societies which called for, of all things, not cutting animals open when they're still alive. How crazy is that? They weren't asking for people to stop everything they're doing and leave their houses and give the cats to take over their house, and because then
I've read those people too.
Right? It's like, so this constant story of seeking the right balance shows up in so many different places in our, as well as how we treat our pets, and then seeing pets as the bringers of balance in our lives. And that's what,
and telling us when we are out of balance.
If
your dog starts eating the tuna fish can off the top shelf above the fridge, there is something that you are not listening to. And that's what people, I don't think, realize. We're all busy. I know I should be exercising. Am I? No, not today. Not this week, not this year. So I know what I should be doing, but then you get a dog and all of a sudden now I'm motivated to do things. And I am looking at myself. I wish that more people were able to look at their dog and really reflect on, okay, why are they here? What is a theme? What is a theme in my life? And what have I done to evolve, or my soul is growing or evolving? How can I thank the dog for that? Or animal? How have they pushed me forward? It'd be really interesting if people shifted the way they look at them.
And to use not only animals as those guides, but also just everything, looking for signs everywhere, looking for inspiration. I mean, some of the times, and that when and I know I'm not alone in this, but when I think about things, when I want to get some kind of guidance, I turn to nature, the ocean, going to the sea can be some of the most informative, just watching the way that the waves come in and watching them go back out again, and the way that the life all around it works off of that the sandpipers, so, not to get too sappy about it, but it's just like that's where the animals come in too, that they're part of it. And I mean, it's happened over the last 20 years a couple of times where, I either want to get a pet, I want to go to the adoption center, and there's one that I really was looking at, but then the right one shows up.
Exactly.
And they let themselves know.
I do believe that everything in this life happens with perfection, and we don't have to like it. Anybody has cancer, you're not enjoying this ride, but your soul needs to learn something. And so you chose to come here, you chose to have this experience. And, hopefully by the end of your life, you've got the knowledge you need, and then you kind of die, go to Homer Club, and you and your guide sitting there like, how'd you do? Like, oh, totally nailed it. Yeah. Well, how about here and here? Oh, right. Well, I'll sit down. So tell me why you did that. And then you're still in heaven, but you kind of have to process before you get to go and play. And with the animals and nature, I think we get validation from nature all the time. My son is 16, has his license, and I was following him to school so we could park his car and I could drive him up to the school. And I was thinking, God, he's got a little bit of a lead foot, and a hawk flew over me right in that moment. And I was like, yeah, he needs to pay attention. And then I thought, I've already told him enough. I'm going to let this one go. And today, when he gets home, I'll tell him, pay attention, kid, because there was a hawk. And my cat, Casper, my favorite kitty, the orange one that I adopted 3 days before the dog showed up, he was attacked on my deck by a bobcat 7 years ago now. And it was 7 o'clock at night. Zachary and I were sitting here. We had just had dinner, got my laptop. I was doing some work, and I hear a cat fight outside. And we ended up going out, and my slider was heavy. So I was going through the mudroom thinking it was just a regular cat. And Zachary opens the slider, and there's the bobcat with my cat in its mouth. And I scream, hey, and the cat drops my cat and then turns at my kid, hey, again. And, the bobcat hops off the deck. And then, I had to grab my cat from under my car, put him in the mudroom. And Zachary and I worked really well together. He's like, what do I do? I'm like, turn on the lights. And I'm thinking outside lights. 7-year-old kid turns on all the inside lights. I was like, thank you. I meant outside. And then I was in the mudroom, and it had a glass door. And I was like, I need paper towels because he had blood. And the poor thing, I didn't know if he was going to make it. And Zachary saw me vulnerable. And I sat in the mudroom and I did energy work on the cat, not like oming and lighting sage, but I prayed, which to me is the same as energy work. And I prayed for either a quick ending for this cat or for healing, and for me to know what to do and what to say to my son to get us through this. So that whole experience, he ended up making it through. Then I called the vet. They're like, if he's breathing, just leave him. Let's see how he does. And then the next day I went to the vet. And then a week later, he needed a feeding tube. And then a week later, he pulled out his feeding tube. And then a week later, he had an abscess. So that experience is how, when I said I dated somebody who was a vet tech, after all of that, I was like, I think I owe you a drink.
Yeah.
So I ended up connecting with a human that I had no intention of ever dating. And this cat was kind of like, well, my bear Sarah's not getting this family thing, so activate Plan Bobcat. And it was traumatic. I swear I have PTSD from it. But Zachary is 16, and he's like, Mom, I need a tattoo of Casper, and I'd like to do it before he dies. And I'm like, all right, well, we can do that. And he's like, can we do it now? I'm like, no, because remember the pink retainers you got when you had braces, and now you've outgrown that. Pink is fun. He's like, yeah. I'm like, we're not doing that yet. But when you're older, absolutely.
Yeah.
So the cat was a monumental lesson for me and my son. Monumental, because my kid was he was a turd. He was a rough kid to raise. He was angry. And it took it out on me. And in that moment, he and I were 100% present, working with each other in collaboration, and hugging me and loving me and supporting me, as I did the same for him. So the cat really took one for the team.
Yeah. But in a big way, but and he's like
fine. I mean, he still hunts, and when he meows, his tongue goes at a 90-degree angle, but he's still out and about.
We've had traumatic events with our animals as well, and that's what has put my household in touch with yours over the years, is because we want to talk about it in a different way and see it from a different perspective. So, and it's every time these things happen, I guess that's really what it comes down to for a psychic. And tell me if I'm wrong about this. I think that psychics it's not like magical powers. It's just that you pay a lot more attention to the signs.
I figured out how to use my senses to get information. Yeah. So in my mind, I see pictures. So if I see, let's say somebody's mother died around Easter, I might see an Easter basket, or like palm fronds, which would have been around church, I think, around that time. And so I will get an image in my head, and I see it the same way you see what you had for breakfast today. It's like a memory, but it's a thought. And then I will get goosebumps. So I'm also a hypnotist. Like, it's not like I can get any weirder. So I'm also a hypnotist. And in the class, we would do a past life regression on someone, and all of a sudden I'd be getting goosebumps, or I'd be getting goosebumps on half my body, or the back part of my head versus the front part of my head. And that's when I started realizing, like, oh, spirit's trying to get my attention. It's energy. So energy can affect things like our hearing, the sound, like you're going up a hill and your ear pressure changes, or goosebumps, or temperature changes, or lights turning on and off. So I started realizing, like, oh, every time I'm talking to this person, my right side gets tingly or goosebumpy. And every time that happens, they're talking about their grandmother. So I started realizing and connecting the dots, like, oh, my right side is female, mom, daughter, grandmother, great grandmother. Or yes, my left side is masculine energy, father, grandfather, great grandfather. And no, usually there are times when it changes. And I've just done it long enough that I can pick up on it. But once I figure out yes and no, I can play 20 questions and get to the bottom of anything. Like, does your dog have cancer? Yes, no. Is it emotional? Is it physical? Is it the medication they're on? Is it their food? So it's like, yes is food, left, no would be diet or medication. So I figured out how to have an instant game of 20 questions in the background. So the front of my head is like where you go and you buy the products that the elves have made for Santa. And the back of my head is where they're rolling through the Rolodex of questions, and it's firing up back there, and then it comes out my mouth. So as I'm talking to you in psychic mode, the back part of my brain is almost already prepping for the next thing they want to tell you. It's very fascinating.
I was going to say, I mean, it's something that probably exists for a lot more people than they know. And it's just that you've learned to kind of harness it and channel it.
Oh my gosh. How many times have you thought of someone and then the phone rings and it's them? You're like, I haven't talked to you in years. So I'll give you a perfect example of this. My dad died. I think it'll be 3 years this July, I think, because math is hard. And my college roommate, Mandy, lives in France, married a Spanish man. They have 2 teenage kids. And I lost her. I couldn't find her. She lives in France. It's not like I'm going to find her. Her Spanish husband has like 5 last names. Mm-hmm. And I just kind of chalked it up to someday our paths will cross. Well, my dad dropped dead of a massive heart attack, and he had health ups and downs, but we didn't think it was just going to drop. I thought it would be a long, prolonged thing. And he died on a Saturday morning. I think it was Monday, either Sunday or Monday. I was sitting by his pool. And a friend had come over to sort of support me. And I was like, God, how am I going to do this? And I see somebody walking up the walkway, and it was freaking Mandy with her kids and her husband from France. And she looked at me, and I lost it. Like you see in the movies when your love comes home from overseas. Like I lost it. And she said, what is happening? And I said, my dad just died. And she said, we're in the States. We're going to the ocean for a week. And I drove by your exit because we always came back after college because she lived in Connecticut and I was at UNH. So we would stop in Massachusetts on the way down. Mm-hmm. And she said, I don't know. I saw your exit and I knew I needed to drive by your dad's house, and I saw the cars. I cannot make that up. No. I could not have coordinated or orchestrated that had I wanted to. It's phenomenal. And I needed her in that moment, and there she was, and she was exactly what I needed. It's just phenomenal.
It is, and it's one of those things. If you think about it too much, it kind of it is too much. You need that balance.
You can deconstruct it and take away the beauty of it and the miracle of it. I like to just go with thank you. And people can play the psychic game. If you have anyone dead in heaven, which we all have somebody, and you need a parking spot, I ask my mom and dad for parking spots everywhere I go. When my dad died and left us a little bit of money, or a little bit, he left me more money than I thought I would ever have. He left me money, and I was like, all right, Dad, I don't want to blow this. I want to make the most of it. I'm going to Home Depot and I need a floor, and I don't know anything about it. And hickory floor, I wanted hardwood. Hickory flooring was on sale, 5-inch boards for $3 something a square foot versus the $9 or $10 it normally is. I bought all of it.
Yeah.
Dad. So I went in talking to him saying, help me out. And so if we think that within the context of the globe and the universe, we have a place in it, and our animals and our higher powers and our loved ones in heaven want us to do well. And if it's not do well, they want us to do what we need to do for our soul to get its lesson. These animals just get plopped. Like this chocolate lab sitting next to me. I was reading her breeder on a Monday, who I know from dog shows and I love. And on a Friday, she handed me the leash of a chocolate lab. Like literally handed me a chocolate lab, purebred. And it was like, here. I'm like, all because I said my kid and I are looking. She showed up at the absolute perfect time. And if I had been shopping for a dog, I wouldn't have had her. Yeah, it's just, it's magnificent. If we can get out of the way and let the magic happen and wait for the doors to open, we can affect so much more change in this world. So when somebody's rescuing animals, if you don't like what they're doing, that's fine. You don't have to go against them. Let them do it. There's an audience for them. There are certain nonprofit animal rescues that I will not support for ethical reasons, because I see the behind the scenes as a psychic. But then I'm not blasting it everywhere. I'm just choosing to put my time and my words elsewhere. And it's also bad for business for me to slam people. Right.
That's true. So we won't make that list on the website. Yeah. I really can't thank you enough for taking the time to do this, because to bring things home again. It was once again you who gave that, I'd been interested in radio for a while, and, but you're meant to be in it. Think about it. But I was like, and then it wasn't something I asked for. I mean, like I said before, we were talking about my cat, and then you just hit me with it, and you're like, you got to do this. You got to, and I said, all right. So do you know Heather Cox Richardson, the historian? No. Heather Cox Richardson sort of blew up during COVID and when Trump was president, and the Roe versus Wade, all the things that
all the way that our Constitution and Declaration of Independence, all the way that this is being challenged, she just the facts, ma'am. And I would say she leans more democratically. So it resonates a little more with me, but it's fascinating because she ties in the historical context with where we find ourselves today, and then overlays, but this is what the Constitution was intended for. And so she has helped me get my bearings and understand what's going on. And also, I wouldn't say inspiring me to advocate for myself, but inspires me to be more intelligent so that I can have a conversation about what's going on. You, I want to say you, my friend, have this ability, and I think could be on the same level as her, of getting people to look at their lives and say what works and what doesn't. And why do you do this? Like if every Sunday you go to church and every Sunday you hate going to church, is it okay to look at that and say, what would better serve my connection to a higher power? Because when I go to church and I listen to, I was raised Catholic, and my confirmation, the priest was talking about abortion. I was like 17. Like, that didn't feel good, but I have my own version of spirituality now in religion, and it's so much broader and it's so much more available, and it gives me peace and faith and hope. So I think that if you wanted to foster the ability to reach a global audience, that's what I'm hearing, you have the ability to do so. And what I like about you and her is both of you aren't doing it from ego. She's from down East Maine. She's salt of the earth. She's blessed to have this knowledge that she's worked for, and she's not doing it to instigate. She's just saying, here's what it is, take it or leave it, but this is what I know to be true. And I think that you have the ability to sit in front of someone and say, okay, every time I've talked to you, you've complained about XYZ. So tell me, have you done anything about it? No. Okay. So tell me culturally, why do you think you have to suffer to be good? Like, the martyrdom is a big thing in our country right now. The harder we struggle, you must be winning. I live in Conway, New Hampshire, ski capital. So, I worked 80 hours on vacation week. And I'm like, well, you're a loser. I worked 20 and I feel great. But if you don't work that number of hours, like right now, even in the restaurant industry, if you're not struggling, you're not working as hard. And it's a perception. You can help people change their perception in their role within the world, which is going to take them to magnificent places.
Well, I am once again flattered by taking the time to see this. I mean, it's I guess you did kind of sum up maybe why I do what I do, and why I have so much fun doing this. So I can't thank you enough. And
thank you so much.
What a great way to round out the first season of this experiment of mine, this podcast. And
congratulations on that.
Thank you so much. And everybody, Sarah Moore. So how can they find you online? Is it
you can go to my website, enlightenedhorizons.com. And then I'm also on Facebook, Sarah Moore Enlightened Horizons. And every now and then I'll do a Facebook Live. I bought a hot tub this fall, and every now and then I'll be silly and do a Facebook Live in my hot tub where I just say, throw me questions. And I sit there and I answer questions.
My wife did that on New Year's Eve. I
had champagne because I was like, this is too silly not to do. And I had a blast. And then I realized, like, the sun went down, it was dark, and I didn't even know because I'm just reading the screen. And I looked up, I was like, oh, Jesus, it's dark out. Sorry, guys.
I think it was going to start snowing or something too.
Yeah, exactly. I really appreciate being on here, and I'm just really blessed to be a part of this. So thank you.
Well, and thank you to all who's listening right now. And you're listening to the EPS podcast, where everything, including how we treat our animals, rescue societies, and pet psychics, are primary sources. So we'll talk to you again next season, and I hope everyone does well. Until then, take care. Thank you again, Sarah.
Thank you.
That's it. A whole season of the EPS podcast in the can. I want to thank everybody who is involved in making this happen, and especially you, the listener. If you like what you hear, please go over to patreon.com/EPS podcast and throw some support behind the program. Otherwise, keep following me on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. Everywhere you can find your podcasts, and before you know it, another season will begin with just as many diverse and exciting guests and topics for you to listen to. Until then, thanks for listening, and remember to tune in next time to the EPS podcast, where everything is a primary source.